the main purpose of this video was to show you how easy a patch statement can be. As long as you're organized and keep everything organized, a patch statement is really easy. You just name the SharePoint field and then you put in your Power Apps field. Hey everyone, this is My SharePoint Questions and I am Andrew Hess. So we've been working on this app for quite a little bit of time, over a month now. Every Sunday, but since today is July 4th, I'm working on Monday. But today I wanted to work on the form when we create a task. So I wanted to work on this form here. So right now we have some projects, right? And each of these projects has their own tasks. And if you'd like to see this work, it's all in my previous videos. So when we go to create a task, you'll notice that the project ID is matched up. So when I show the project ID here, it's going to galProjects.Selected.ID. So that depends on this first gallery. So depending on which gallery I click on, or which item I click on in this gallery, when I go to create a task, it matches it with the ID in SharePoint. So if we go to SharePoint and we go to project list, we can see I have the ID here. So ID 35. This is in my project list SharePoint list. It's also in my task list. So you can see the project ID here is repeating because we're writing that from Power Apps. So now I want to do the same thing with task order, right? So right now task order is blank, and so I'm going to move it up just so we can see. But we have task order and it's blank, and we don't want it to be blank. We want it to be, so say there's 1 and 4, we want the next one to be 5. So what I want to do is I want to look up in that column the highest number there, and then I want to replace the task order ID with a 5. So let's work on that real quick. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this task order ID and I'm going to do lookup. And what I want to look up is the project tasks list, and that's my SharePoint list. And I want to look up the project ID, so that's this project ID is equal to the projects.selected.ID. And what I want to pull out is the task order ID. So let's see what we get there. So right now it's 7, and that's because it's pulling in a random number in there. What I want to do is I want to pull in the highest number. So I'm going to sort the project task ID by the task order ID, descending, so we get the highest number. So I have 12.1. So let's see, task order ID 12.1. That's here. Let's check another one out. Let's check out here one that has 1 and 2. It now says 2. Let's just check out one more for just to make sure we're clear. So we have one here. It's 4. So we check it out. It's 4. So after that, what we want to do is we want to add 1. Let's see, that changes to 5, but not just 1, right? So let's say we went to this one here, and the highest order ID is 12.1. We don't want it to be 13.1. We want it to round this number by 0 digits. So we want it to go to 13. So I think that's correct. Let's try it out. So here, if we do one, test order ID at 13. So if we save, it's going to write in the order ID at 13. If we create another one, it should be 14. Now let's check another project just to make sure it's working here too. So create task. It should be 3. It is 3. So test a new task at 3. So if we save here, the next time we create one, it should be 4. So that's looking correct. We now have the task order ID searching for the highest order ID here and then placing that in there. So, we can leave this as 14. We can allow people to change it. We can not allow. But I'm going to default it to that lookup. So what we did was we looked up the task order ID, right? We looked up the task order ID, but we rounded it. And what we did here is we sorted our project task list. So if we go here, we sorted our project task list by descending value, but we're only doing it when the project ID equals the project selected. So when the project ID is 2, so if we come here, when the project ID is 2, we're sorting those and pulling in the highest task order. That's how I'm trying to explain this. And so then we now have the task order ID filled in. Now what I did here was I just created a submit form. Now in Power Apps, there's a few different ways to do forms. Now it all depends on how much time you want to put in this and how much customization you want to put into this. If you just do insert form and add it in there, it's really easy, it's really fast. We can just connect right to the data, to the project task list. So that's what I did here. I just went into forms, edit, and added it. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to create a completely custom form just to show you, the way that Power Apps does this does take up a lot of space. There's a lot of little extras in here. If you come into a card, you'll notice the star, so that will, if it's required, if a field is required, the star will appear. There's an error message that'll tell you something's wrong. The data card value is here, and also the label. So let's say we want to get rid of this form entirely. I'm going to take a screenshot of this form just so I remember what fields we have, and we're going to create a completely custom looking form, something that looks a little better. Now if you do this way, it is going to take you more time, but you're going to have a lot more customization. We can come into this form and change some of these, like let's say how about task type. We can come in here and come into the form and easily go to edit fields, task type, and then change it to a allowed values, right? So we can change it to an allowed values and easily just fill it in and uncheck it and just say there's a few different options. There's tasks, it's a task, subtask, or a milestone. Or a milestone. So we have now changed already this single line text to a drop down. Now in SharePoint, it's still a single line text. It's still a single line text here. If we did a new field, it is still a single line text, the task type. So we can just write in there. But in Power Apps, we've converted it to a drop down. So you can go about this way. It is way faster to just use the out of the box form in Power Apps. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something a lot neater. So I'm going to delete that entire form. All right, so our save button is broken, but that's fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a text input, and this is going to be my project ID, and a label. Project ID. Now for this text input, it was the galProjects.Selected.ID, right? So we've already filled that in. And look at that, we don't need a lot of space anymore. And this is just going to be in view mode. We're not going to allow people to edit it. It's going to be display mode in view. And now let's do the same thing for our task order ID. Task order ID. Now I did save the equation for my default, so I'm just going to paste that right in. It was this lookup equation, so right there we now have the task order ID. And we're saving so much more space than the out-of-the-box version that Power Apps had. So we can do display mode. We can change this one to edit. You know, we can allow people to edit that one if they want to change the order ID. Now our next field will be, let's see, if I go to my screenshot, the title. So I'm just going to change this to title. And we'll add another text input. And I can actually remove the border radius. Sometimes I don't like the border radius. Or actually, I just removed the border on that one. Let me change that back. Add the border radius in, or change the border radius to 0. So we have title. There will be no default here. And as we're doing this, it's really important to go and rename. So I know my picture's there. Let me move my picture. All right, I moved my picture back to the right side. It's really important, and I know maybe you don't want to, but it's really important to go in here and name each one of your fields. So text, task, order ID, title. I'm going to say rename text, project title. And it's really important because it's going to make your patch statement when we write to SharePoint, it's going to make your life so much easier. All right, so the next one we'll just copy paste. And this one is going to be priority. And I'm going to go ahead and rename it. All right, so now the next one is %complete. All right, let's keep going. I'm just going to do cost now. So this is actually planned cost, but I'm going to call it cost. So we're going to have actual cost and cost. So in cost, one thing that we can do is we can set it so it only allows numbers. So right here in the format, we can change this to number. So now it only allows numbers. If you try and type text in, it's not going to allow you. But if you type numbers, it will allow you to write numbers. All right, next is going to be actual cost. And make sure to rename each of your text boxes. I'm telling you, it's really important. It's going to make your life so much easier later on. And next we're going to do risk. Risk, I'm going to change it to a dropdown. I'm going to change risk to a dropdown. And so for my options, I'm just going to write in here because I know this is not going to change much. Low, medium, and high. I know that my risk options are not going to change much. So it's either going to be low, medium, or high. And you know, we can change the default by changing the order. Let's say, you know, maybe you want medium to be the default. You could easily, you know, change the order, or you can go in there to the default. I'll leave low as the default option. All right, so now task status. Let me make sure to line these up. Now for the first drop down, you noticed I did text there. For this one, I'm going to do drop risk. And so this is actually risk. And this one is task status. And that's either complete or not complete. And so those are my only two options I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you complete or not complete. So you only have two options, complete or not complete for task status. Now let's do dates. So input, date picker. I'm going to put this one over here. And the label will be start date. Oops. So this will be start date. And for this one, I'm going to do DTE. So I'm just going to say rename DTE start date. I'm going to do the same thing, except for now we're going to do end date. I'm going to give a little more space just because, you know, dates can be annoying sometimes. End date. And this will be DTE end date. Okay. And then finally, we're going to have task type. And our options, and I know we're not going to change much, are going to be task. It's either a task, a subtask, or a milestone. All right, and let me rename this drop down. Drop task type. All right, we have now recreated our form in a different way. It saves a lot more space. So let's say we had a ton more fields. We can fit a lot more in here. We could even put in a comment field. Let's say, let's do that. Let's add a comment field. And I'm going to do a rich text editor. And this is going to be called comments. All right, and we're going to get rid of the default text. Okay, so now this is a comments field, so we have to add that to SharePoint. So let me add that to SharePoint real quick. We'll go to list settings, create a column, and it's going to be a multi-line text field, and it's going to be called comment, and not comments, but comment, and we'll leave it as enhanced rich. All right, so we added a new field called comment. Come back to Power Apps. I'll refresh my database just so it picks that up. All right. So now we're going to change our save button. Our save button is going to be a patch statement this time. Instead of submit form, you saw we had submit form, we're going to do patch. And the way we set this up, it's so easy. I mean, it's not much harder to do this. You're just going to name your SharePoint list. So that is our ProjectTasksList. So we're just going to break this down and make it simple for now, and then we'll add more into it when we go into edit. So right now, our first record, we're just writing. We're going to do ProjectID is equal to text, ProjectID.Text. We made this really simple for us. TaskOrderID is equal to text, TaskOrderID.Text. And if you notice when I end this, it's actually going to give me an error because TaskOrderID is actually a number. So what we have to do is do value of TextOrderID.Text. Now when we close that parentheses and we added our last squiggly, it's still giving me an error because we need the project ID to be the same. Is also a number value. All right, so now we have the value of project ID, the value of text task order ID. So let's keep going. Now we're going to do title. Title is equal to the text project title.text. And that one's fine. We don't need a number there. And I'm just going to go down each one of these. Now you can see how much longer this does take, and we can format. If we hit the format button, that does help. We can see that this does take a little bit longer than the simple submit form. But we're getting a lot more UI UX out of it than we did before. All right, so now we're going to do risk. Now the thing about risk is it's just, what's different is it's just drop risk.selected.value. I know this is basic stuff, but it's good to go over this stuff again. And now we'll do the dates. So start date is, this one's a little different, DTE start date.selected date. All right, end date, DTE end date.selected date. And finally, we have our comment field. and we did refresh the database. We have text. Let's see if I renamed the comment field. I don't think I did. Okay. So this is a rich text editor. I'm just going to call it text comment. No difference, right? It's still a text field. So text comment dot, I believe this one is different, HTML text. All right. So now we've recreated the form. And instead of using the normal submit form, we are using a patch statement. So let's go back. Let's create a task. New patch task. We have some default values in here. These are my comments. And we'll make one of these bold just so we can see the difference. End date is going to be set out here a little bit further. So let's save. It is patching. Let's check out SharePoint. So we have a new patch. Let me rearrange these. So new patch task. I'm going to rearrange my fields in SharePoint. So if I come down here to sort and I do ID, I'm going to do descending. So with the ID, the highest ID at the top. So now always my newest one, my newest ID will be at the top. So you notice my comments are now in bold in SharePoint. So thank you guys for watching. The main purpose of this video was to show you how easy a patch statement can be. As long as you're organized and keep everything organized, a patch statement is really easy. You just name the SharePoint field and then you put in your Power Apps field. So you name your SharePoint field and you put in your Power Apps field. And this is just to write, right? So we're just writing to ProjectTasksList from the SharePoint field name to the Power Apps field name. There's a few little gotchas in there. If it's a number, you have to convert it to a value. If it's a date, you have to do selected date. If it's a rich text or an HTML, you have to do .html.Text. There's lots of little things we can do in here. And then also, we can do some CSS ourselves, kind of add some things in here. Like when I do 0.3% complete, we can see that it fills in the bar 30%. So now that we actually have some data in here, I think my next videos are going to be creating some charts. I know people really love charts. They love Power BI, and everybody loves to see these red, yellow, greens. So I think my next videos are going to be taking this data that we're inputting, and we're going to take this data and we're going to create some neat charts and kind of, check it out, see what we can do there. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.